I'm Dave Chester, Leominster Historical Commission and the Leominster Book Committee. Today I have with me a Leominster native who is the New England Collegiate Heavyweight Wrestling Champ and also an All-American tight end at the University of Massachusetts. And he was also several years an All-Pro tight end for the Cleveland Browns, Milt Morin.
Hi, Dave. Morning.
How you doing? Well, thanks for coming. And first of all, I want to start this off by asking you, you were first-round pick of Cleveland as well as San Diego.
It was the last year of the dual draft. This is before the first Super Bowl. It was 1966. And it was the last year of the dual draft where it wasn't the AFC of the breakup of the NFL. There were two different leagues. And I was drafted by San Diego in the second round, and I was drafted in the first round by Cleveland. I chose Cleveland because they needed a tight end. I thought I'd have a better opportunity. Actually, what I didn't know then, because I was on the outside coming in, was that if I went with San Diego, I would have beat out their tight end, and they would have traded the other tight end, and I would have had John Hadl thrown to me. Maybe stat-wise, I would have had much bigger statistics. Also might have broken my leg the first year, so nothing's certain. Cleveland, I ended up starting every game as a rookie, so I can't complain about my playing time.
So what did they expect of you going in as a rookie? What did they anticipate from you?
Well, being a wrestler and about 250, 55 pounds in the late 60s, that was a decent-sized tight end. And tight ends had to do a lot of solo blocks on defensive ends and linebackers, so they were expected to do a lot of severe blocking. So they had me pegged for a battering ram. They had Jimmy Brown left in 65, I came in 66, and then Leroy Kelly, Hall of Fame back, was starting to have his 1,000-yard years, and Greg Pruitt had a few 1,000-yard years. So we had a succession while I was there of great running backs. So my ability to block is probably what they expected the most. They already had Paul Warfield, Hall of Fame receiver. They had Gary Collins, who the previous year caught 3 touchdown passes in a championship game against the Colts, which Cleveland beat. Then they had Leroy Kelly emerging as a 1,000-yard back out of the backfield. So what role I was going to play initially was to help Leroy get his 1,000 yards and, like I said, play a bigger part in blocking. But as far as becoming a part of the receiving game, the passing game, I'd have to earn that right in my performance. If they consistently went to me on third down and I came through with a lot of big plays and caught most of what they threw, then they would think of me more often and lean on me, and I kind of earned my way into getting my share of the plays. If there were 65, 70 offensive plays, I came in as a rookie and I was only going to get an opportunity for like 4 catches. But if they threw over a period of time, I catch 44 in a row, they have to start thinking of me as being a part of their offense, and you earn that right in your play. And I worked hard at that. It was all effort. Concentration and effort were the 2 big key words for me.
That is a lot of catches in the NFL in a row, 44. Now, you had a style of receiving where you caught it with your hands, and explain that to me, how you did that.
Well, even a pass that was rifled at my chest, might have been a cross or a hook, I would always catch away from my body, maybe 3 yards, and I would control the ball out here. That way, when the defensive back and the linebackers timed their hit for when the ball got to your chest, by the time they made their hit, I already had control of the ball. But so I might lose the battle, but I won the war because I made the catch. So you take some pretty big hits as a tight end, but you're expected to. And you live in a world of linebackers, which either you hit or get hit. And I always had good hands from playing basketball, baseball, football, lacrosse, wrestling, track. So I had, receiving just came natural to me. It's something I didn't even have to think about. All it was is concentration and effort. And if you want to catch it, you'll catch it. And by catching away from my body, like you said, it guaranteed me more catches. I actually caught a pass one time, Dave. This is the truth. Against Detroit Lions, I ran an out, and I took such a hit coming off the line that my helmet was facing sideways, and I was looking through the ear hole.
Is that
I
right?
still made the catch.
No
I had
kidding.
one eye looking through the ear hole, and I still made a 13-yard out
Wow.
catch. I wasn't sure I caught it until the official pulled the ball out of my hands, but you know, you might as well get paid, might as well do your job. You're going to take the hit anyway. You're going to get hammered, so why not make a living getting hammered, you know?
And I also remember you as a great runner after the catch. You used to bowl over quite a few people. Now, where did that come from?
Well, you may not believe this, but I went to St. Cecilia's Elementary School, and I can remember at recess in the schoolyard that we always played a game where guys would chase people around, and we had like a little jail area, and you could tag a guy out of the jail area. And I can remember as a 7th, 8th grader being really good at that, busting through people, tagging a guy free. And I am sure that those origins have a lot to do with me just love running with the ball. It was just like an extension of recess. So running with the ball has always been recess for me. And it was something that you know, you evaluate your strong and weak points. So that being one of my strong points, I tried to emphasize that as much as possible. People remember the 3 best plays you make in a game. They remember the 3 worst plays you make. So if you can eliminate the 3 worst,
Right.
and through just sheer effort,
Yeah.
make 3 big plays, they're going to remember you as a big playmaker. And that's how it was in the schoolyard.
Well, it goes back to your roots, way back in St. Cecilia's.
Exactly.
That's good. Now, tell me some of the people that you played against. You used to have to block. You know, you faced some defensive ends, linebackers. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we had guys like Bubba Smith, Dick Butkus, Deacon Jones, Ted Hendricks, Larry Wilson, a lot of Hall of Famers. It seemed like every week I was playing against 1 or 2, Bob Lilly, 1 or 2 Hall of Famers. I could tell you many stories that I think are kind of interesting, like, for example, short yardage situation against the Steelers.
Yeah.
They used to take Joe Green from the tackle position, move him out on ahead of the tight end, so I'd be giving up like 25 pounds, and I'd be expected to kind of solo block him in a short yardage situation. He's down in 4-point stance, so I've got to root him out, and I found out the best thing for me to do was to straighten him up and block him high and headbutt him in the face and block his visibility from the running back. Well, it was a standing fist fight, and I guess if you were scoring it, he won. But if he's busy fighting with me, he's not making a tackle. So basically, I won.
Yeah.
So there were problem individuals that, and then a lot of times comments during a game were a lot of fun. I remember playing the Kansas City Chiefs, and Willie Lemire, who's a Hall of Famer now, he was always in competition with Dick Butkus for All-Pro, the best in the league. So they were very conscious of other players because the players had a vote in who was the best. So they would always be trying to impress you with how good they were to beat their competition.
Yeah.
And I remember one time in Kansas City coming off the line, and Willie Lanier kind of caught me blindside and gave me a real serious shot.
Yeah.
And so I remember him saying to me, "How do you like that, Morin?" And I said, "You hit like a grape." Well, it might have been funny at the time, but the unfortunate thing is for the next 45 plays, he was going to show me that he didn't hit like a grape, and I just kind of got things stirred up. I should never have said that. I should have said, "Oh, you're the hardest hitter I've ever seen," and maybe he'd have backed off me a little bit. But you survive. A lot of it is you're not paid for ability, you're paid for survival, your ability to survive all those collisions, like thousands of collisions. And I told you, Dave, earlier that I'm about 51% normal. I used to be 49% last year, but this year I'm 51%.
It's getting better.
Definitely getting better.
Good.
It's not something you can see, but it's there.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you had Leroy Kelly, a running back, and you had Warfield, you had Collins, and yourself. So the ball wasn't spread around too much. How much of your game plan was running, or was it according to the team you're playing, or did you have to block more? How did you work yourself into that?
Any offense with Leroy Kelly in the backfield means get the ball to Leroy as many as 30 times if you could a game, because anytime he gets a ball in his hands, it's a potential 70-yard run. So you've got to, if your best punch is a hook, you're going to try to use your hook as much as you can. Well, Leroy was our hook. And then Warfield, a Hall of Famer, and Gary Collins was coming off a championship game with 3 touchdown catches, I might have mentioned. And so I had to kind of fit in on a small level and then gradually build that up. But it was hard. I'll give you an example. I was in one Pro Bowl, and Jackie Smith, who's a Hall of Famer, was the other tight end.
Right.
Well, he caught 53 passes that year, but they keep statistics on number of passes thrown to a person.
Right.
He had way over 150 passes thrown to him.
Wow.
I caught 43. I had 45 passes thrown to me that year. So I caught 43 out of 45, and a count a catchable pass is something you can touch or get in the area where the ball is. So basically, if we were keeping baseball batting averages, I had a 900 batting average and he had a 100 batting average. But like anything else, without the opportunity, you can't catch 100 passes if people throw you 45 passes.
Right.
I always felt that I had the potential to catch 100 passes a year, but it really wasn't my part to play in the system. We had other weapons that were better than me. So let's use all the weapons and share it and make the best use. And what they used to call a balanced attack. And what that means is that the defense can't anticipate what you're going to do. They don't know if you're going to run a pass, and that's what you want, because then it makes your pass or run more effective.
And can you compare the players when you played as the players now, you know, the size and the speed and so forth?
Well, the game, the way I'd compare them is to say that the game was different. I think the defenses today are a lot more sophisticated than when I played. For example, when I played, the Browns with Jimmy Brown and Leroy Kelly averaged almost 8 yards a carry on sweeps. So it was very important to have fast guards that could get out in front of the play and block downfield. Gene Hickerson, John Wooten, guys like that.
Yeah.
Today, the blocking arrangement is different. They allow you to put your hands out here, so a guy that's 6'8" reaches 6'8". In my day, if a guy was 6'3", 260, but bullet quick, then he could get out and really lead those sweeps. Well, they don't run those type of plays as much anymore, and they want the guys that can reach far for pass blocking. So the guards today are like 6'7", 6'8", 300 pounds. In my day, they were like John Hanna type. They might have been 260, but very fast. Well, actually, and you may find this kind of funny, but the guards that were playing in the 60s and 70s when I played would not make the guard position today in the NFL.
Wow.
But the guards playing in the NFL today, except for a few guys, would not make the team as guards when I played because it was a different system.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that the biggest change is in the mental aspect of the game. Let's say you had 40 running and 25 passing plays and a few gadgets, and you could approach defenses that had certain set defenses. Well, now with 4 linebackers and a lot of these more sophisticated defenses, the possibilities are higher. So you might have 300 possibilities during the course of a game, decisions to make, whereas when I played, you might have had 150. So it's very easy to get your thinking saturated today by the variations in the defense. So I think it's harder to play mentally today. But believe me, a standing fist fight with Bubba Smith or Deacon Jones, I don't care what the play is, that is a busy afternoon.
I'll bet it was. Yeah, those people are really tough. And another thing is, I remember for a while, I don't know if it still holds, you had the longest play, pass and run. I believe it was around 87 yards.
It was against the Eagles, and it probably sticks out in my mind, but what's kind of ironic about it is I went 87 yards on a reception just by breaking tackles. I probably ran 500 yards because I ran sideline to sideline. I wasn't out running anybody. I was kind of running over people.
Yeah.
But I made this diving lunge for the end zone. I got tackled on the 1. Well, probably what's so unique about that run, it was a record for a long time. I don't know if it still holds. But what I think is unique about it is how many people go 87 yards and don't score. You know what I mean?
Well, that
Try to
took a
name
lot
somebody
out
who
of
went
you.
87 yards and didn't score. But the guy that was covering me, his quote in the paper, he played for the Eagles, his quote in the paper was, "I had him covered like a blanket." Well, that's more like a blankie, because I had like 150 yards and a bunch of catches. I don't know if he said he had me covered. I don't know if he was doing it with binoculars, but it wasn't happening for him.
Well, he had to use something to cover up, but it sure didn't show in the stats list, I'll tell you that.
Well, you know, those are the fluke plays that happen every once in a while, and you never know when they're going to happen. You can embarrass yourself on a play, but from a player's standpoint, you don't want to be on film messing up.
Yeah.
You want to be consistent, and you want to make some big plays, and then what that does is send a message out to the next team you're going to play. And I recall a situation against Dallas where I released for a pass route, and Chuck Hawley, the linebacker, grabbed the middle of my jersey, stretched it about a yard, and pulled me over backwards. And then he's snapping his head around looking for the flag and say, "Hey, I got away with one." Well, he didn't get away with one, because the next play I ran through him and gave him a forearm. He went out for the rest of the game. Well, what was great about that wasn't that particular game, was the next 5 games where the linebackers were back off me an extra yard or 2 at the line. You know? So I think it sent the kind of message I wanted to send. You beat me fair and square, I applaud you.
Yeah.
You beat me cheating, then you're going to taste the best I can give you. I'm going to put a little more emotion into it. All legal. Believe me, you do anything illegal and you're thrown out, and you should be thrown out. But they didn't know the power of my forearms if I was mad. And I always made sure it was legal. So the official was standing right where you were when I leveled this guy, and no flag was thrown. But every linebacker who looked at that film, when they study for the next game, realized you hold Morin, you're going to pay a big price for it. And needless to say, I wasn't too popular with the linebackers.
Well, I think being the heavyweight wrestling champ, didn't that help you in either quickness or strength and upper body? How did that wrestling play into your football ability?
Actually, quite a bit, because I didn't take up wrestling till I was like a junior in college, and I got beat by everybody I wrestled my junior year, and I came back the next year and beat all those guys back, because wrestling, what you don't know will hurt you. But it was tremendous for quickness and upper body strength and endurance. So it helped me with a lot of the things that I did well, and it kind of upgraded the things I did well. The upper body strength was great for a lot of times when I would block with people, I would block them high and block out their vision of the play. Well, that came from a lot of long wrestling match. I used to play at 255, but I wrestled at 235.
Oh, wow.
So you were in like just perfect condition, like no body fat, and I've wrestled guys 400 pounds. So there's no place to hide. You can't point to the tackle and say, we didn't make the play because this guy didn't make his block. There's no tackle next to you. Either you've done it or haven't done it. There's no place to hide. And it was good for your attitude, the never quit attitude. Like when I was in a game, the first 3 or 4 plays, I used to play like a man possessed, because I wanted that linebacker to think that this is what he was going to be facing for the next 60 plays, that he had some kind of nut that was high on adrenaline, who was going to be carried away with it. But if he didn't know after the 4th play I was plain old normal, I couldn't sustain that thing, but I kind of psych him out by thinking, well, I'm going to have my hands full with this guy. So it gets to be a mind game. And in wrestling, a lot of it is mind game. You just will step on your tongue tired, but you don't let on. I can remember going back to the huddle many times where I took such a hit I couldn't repeat my name and address. And I'm in the huddle, but I'm not showing that linebacker or defensive back that I took that kind of hit, because I don't want to let him know that he got to me. So a lot of it is you play mind games out there too.
Now, when you started with Cleveland and during your career, you did kicking off, right?
Yeah, I had a long foot. In those days, you know, it all has gone to sidewinders. But when I broke in the league, you still had Lou Groza kicking for the Browns, who is a Hall of Famer that has a tremendous straight-on kicking. You had a lot of real good straight-on kickers when I broke in the league. Well, I was the back-off kickoff guy. We had a kicker. I was the backup kicker for field goals, but I was the kickoff guy. The downside of that is today, a guy kicks off, they have him float around and try to get his hand in on a late tackle or just stay out of harm's way.
Right.
When I kicked off, they had me down cracking the wedge or getting right in the mix.
Unbelievable.
And one of the few injuries I had was coming out of an leg extension from a kickoff. And two guys hit me and I sprained my ankle and I missed one game. But it was all like extra plays. I was already playing all the offensive tight end plays, and I was on some special teams for like field goals and extra points and stuff like that. But they had me kicking off, but rather than let me jog around and stay out of harm's way, they had me down right in the middle of the mix. But I don't know, if I were a coach and I had somebody that could contribute that way, you know, maybe I'd take advantage of it too. I don't know.
I don't know, but it seems like if you get injured, it's going to take away from the offensive production. You know, they're going to have to put in backup tight end. Why they ever had you going down and cracking a wedge? Maybe in those days they thought it was a good thing, but
maybe putting me in my place. You don't. You work for us, you know, and it's
earn your pay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So needless to say, I earn my pay. But one thing nice about it is I had a long leg. Like I actually have kicked off through the uprights on occasion.
Really?
Yeah.
That is
so
a kick.
I could kick a ball a mile. Maybe my accuracy wasn't what it would be as a regular NFL field goal kicker, but as far as distance goes, I can remember many times in practice kicking 63, 65-yard field goals. So kicking off was really, in those days we kicked off from the 40, so most of my kicks would fly out of the end zone. No return, so the special teams loved it because there wasn't any return. But when there was a return, I was cracking the wedge.
When you first went to UMass, you were recruited by quite a few colleges. And what was the reason for choosing UMass?
There were a lot of schools that were interested in me, and they pretty much all offered me a full scholarship. The reason I liked UMass was, for one, I had asked the coach if I had an opportunity to play tight end because I knew at 255 they're going to move me to tackle the second day I was there. But I said I wanted a chance to compete at tight end. So he agreed to that. What he didn't tell me is that over the years I was going to go both ways. I played 65 plays as defensive end, and then I had my chance to play tight end. So he got 3 scholarship positions out of me for 2 years, and then my last year he let me play just tight end. But the biggest reason that I went to UMass was my parents would have an opportunity to drive up to Amherst and see home games. If I went to some place like Michigan State, they might catch a televised game. But this way, they got to participate in watching a lot of my games so they could kind of share my experience with me, and that worked out real good. And needless to say, if I was the first tight end picked in the league in the first round, it didn't make any difference. Gary Collins used to kid me about, he went to Maryland, and he said, your first round draft choice, and who did you ever play? And I said, my answer to him was, well, I can see why you're here from Maryland, but do you think you'd be here if you played at UMass?
That really good.
Yeah, I earned it the hard way.
Yeah.
You know, and but UMass did run a pro set, which is similar to the pros run, and the head coach Vic Fuchsia had a good reputation in the NFL. He coached Mike Ditka in college.
Oh yeah.
So he put in a few good words for me, and the scouts were down looking at Greg Landry already, so they kind of saw me. And I'll tell you what really gets you picked in the NFL. The real secret is your opponents. You play a team like Holy Cross or Harvard or somebody, and that coach sends in reports to the scouts who are asking them if they have anybody that's pro caliber. And he says, well, they got this kid Morin from Massachusetts who's just tearing people apart. He's definitely pro material. This is the kind of opinion that gets you drafted first. Based, some of my best friends are enemies.
Oh, that's good. And I can remember you had an undefeated season up there, and you went to the Tangerine Bowl. Now, you had quite a few players from that team that went on to the NFL.
The most prominent would probably be Greg Landry, who played for Nashua, so Leominster played him. He was probably a nemesis of Leominster. I don't know what their seasons were when he played, but he was behind me a year or two. But he ended up with a long career with the Detroit Lions, and he was a tall, lanky scrambler, pretty good passer. In fact, one of the Pro Bowls I played in, he was a quarterback for the other team.
Oh, yeah?
And then they had a fellow named Phil Vandersea who played 5 years for Green Bay. And they had several fellows play for a year or two.
You had Ed Toner?
Oh, Ed Toner, yeah, I forgot him.
Pats?
Played for the Patriots for 5 years. He told me a story. I talked to Ed the other day, and he told me that they gave him a bonus at the beginning of the year for him anticipated things that he would do. So whatever he was making, they were going to give him like a $5,000 bonus if he was in on so many tackles or he did this or that. Well, what happened is he got hurt and didn't make his quota. He had to take out a loan to pay him back the money. So they don't give anything away, believe me.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I played in an era when players got 5% of gross collectively. So if they grossed $30 million, they took $1.5 million. They divided that among all players, coaches, and overhead, and they pocketed $28.5 million. So we didn't really get a fair share at all. I mean, I know there's athletes that are overpaid grossly, and I mean, it seems unfair, but they earn at least part of that money because they're bringing the crowds in, allowing teams to make, $100 million a year. But there's a lot of exceptional players, maybe 50 guards that are best in the world, the 50 best guards in the world. And in my day, those guys were making $20,000.
Wow.
And the clubs were grossing $25 million, and they're the best best 50 guards in the world, and they're making $22,000. That was just really, it was like immoral. And really, when I think back of it, it's striking. It's striking. And the striking part is there's some people that are so grossly overpaid, they really aren't worth all that money by any stretch of the imagination. But for every one of those, there's 200 that were so grossly underpaid that it's embarrassing to even mention. See, when they instituted the draft system, they took your value away. It's like a donut shop. Cleveland picked me first. They take my tag from the donut shop and they call me when they want me, and they trade the tag around and get $1 million for it and make all the trades of tags. I don't participate in any of that. They come out front and offer me $20,000 to play ball, but they could trade my rights to somebody else for $1 million. So by having the draft system, what they really did is took the value away from these individuals. After 1975, through court cases, it swung back the other way, where now the players really have a lot of say in it, and they get about 50% of gross. So the players really get their fair share. Some get, unfortunately, more than their fair share. But it doesn't seem to me, in a business that grosses $100 million a team, or say 50 to 100 million a team, the players get 50% of gross. That doesn't seem unfair, because we're talking about talent. When you're looking for a 1,000-yard running back, you don't go in the chemistry department at MIT.
Yeah.
You look for a guy who can take hits from Lambert, Ham, Joe Green, a guy who can survive 70 plays week after week against those type of people. That's a special talent. And they should be paid their fair share, but the only way that the players finally got a good grip and are getting a fair share, exclude the 5% that are overpaid. The rest are getting what they deserve. That's high risk. They're unique talents. They're getting what they deserve. And the only reason they got to that point is through winning court cases. They would still be back in the 60s if it wasn't the fact that they won a lot of court cases and the owners had to kind of throw them a pork chop, because somewhere somebody sat back and said, hey, they're getting 95% of all grosses. Who are we paying to see? Not the owners' relatives sitting in the specialty booths. They're paying to see the Leroy Kellys and the Deacon Jones. That's who people want to see. You go to the Celtics, you want to see the birds, the great players. You're not going to go pay to see Joe Dokes, or at least you're not paying $50 a ticket to see Joe Dokes. You want to see the great players. I know that's what I'm paying to see.
Was the union in effect then when you were playing?
They had a players' association, and it lacked any teeth at all.
Oh.
The thing is, you couldn't strike, because here's what would happen. If you struck, they'd bring in a bunch of jerseys to play the games. No one's going to give up their season ticket. They've already got the money in the bank from the television rights. They made a third or more on jackets, hats, T-shirts, things like that. They made a tremendous gate on that. They weren't going to lose a bit in that. Everybody knew that that strike was going to be over. So when there was a strike, the player would lose 1/14 of his income every game that went by he didn't play. What did the owners lose? Actually nothing. The only savings they had, which wasn't significant, was what they were paying the players, which was basically very little anyway. But they didn't even have to pay that. They get to withheld that. So when there was a strike, the owners got this big windfall of money.
Wow.
So how effective can you be in standing up for yourself and your value? And like I say, that draft system totally eliminated your right for anything. So to tell you the truth, the economics of it, I loved playing those 3 hours games, and I loved playing in the NFL for 10 years. The games were the fun part, and the associations and the players I met. But as far as compensation for what I did, I'll bet you I didn't get 5 cents on a dollar. So a lot of people got rich on me, but you know what? I made some income, and I established my family somewhat, but it's just unfortunate that, to be fair, I really should have made maybe 10 to 20 times what I made. And you know, nobody feels sorry for a guy playing in the NFL. Oh, gee, I'd love to play in the NFL. Well, I'll tell you what, you play a couple of games, and when you're crawling around the living room of your house on your hands and knees because you're so beat up. I actually had a situation happen in Cleveland you might find interesting. I had a pickup truck as a second car, and I remember driving on Innerbelt in Cleveland, driving home, and somebody's behind me. I'm pulled to let cars feed in. I'm pulled over to stop, and it was a wet day, and here's this Pinto comes around behind me, and the guy totals into the back of me. He can't put his brakes on. His car is completely totaled. I'm pushed up on the dashboard of my car, the accordion the back of the truck in. This was during the season.
Yeah.
He gets out of his car and he hobbles up to me and he asks me if I'm all right. And I get out of that truck and I start feeling for injuries. And I swear to God, Dave, I could not tell the difference from that total automobile accident and injuries from playing Baltimore the week before, LA the week before, Pittsburgh the week before. I could not tell the difference from that total automobile accident, from those injuries and injuries that I had got. And you're going to play anyway. You're going to play anyway. So I couldn't tell the difference from that accident. And I tell you, it really opened my eyes.
The plane is just as bad as a...
I figured it out. I would say you're going to get one major injury every 4 years. And the reason I'm saying this is I took like an unofficial poll of all the receivers in Cleveland over the years. Warfield, Collins, McNeil, I can name a bunch of guys. And looking at their careers, let's say they average an average of 8 years in their careers, the better players. Over a 10-year period, every single one of them, every 4 years, ended up with either a collarbone, a broken leg, broken arms. I'm talking about sprained wrists, broken fingers, lost teeth. Those aren't injuries. Those are headaches. Those are everyday occurrences. I had a herniated disc, and I came back and played 5 years with it before arthroscopic surgery, so I was very fortunate. So that was the fine print in the contract. You know, what they should have had is a clause that says, oh yeah, there's a 99% chance every 4 years you're going to have some serious surgery. That was never mentioned. That was always just kind of brushed over. And we had guys playing with that kind of risk making $20,000 a year. We had a guy making $17,000 when the gross that year was $26 million. And in fact, the reason I know it is the owner said to me, who the heck are you asking for a $5,000 raise when we got a defensive back making $17,000? I was trying to make like $55,000 coming off an all-star year. And he said, who the hell are you to ask for that? And I said to him, well, you know, I'm basing that on my ability as a tight end compared to with 80 other tight ends in the league. To get in the All-Star game, you've got to be one of the best 4 in the league. So I put myself in the top 10%. That should be worth something. And his answer was, isn't worth anything to me because I own the draft rights on you. You either play for me what I tell you to play for, or you don't play. Oh. And this is the kind of things that I have to deal with. So, but you always play to win. You don't go on the field and say, gee, this owner is really cheating everybody. I'm not going to play hard. You won't be there. You've got to go out there and play 100% because the competitive level is so high. You've got to play as well as you can. And your instincts and your whole competitiveness from growing up as a little kid are to go out and give everything you have. Right. Forget about whether you're giving me 50,000, whether you're giving me 20,000, whether you're giving me 200,000. Doesn't make any difference. You get on the field, you have to play the best you can. Right. You wouldn't be there if that's not the attitude you have.
If you're not prepared, you're going to know it.
Oh, well, you're also going to get hurt too, probably.
That's what I'm talking about. And nowadays, the agents do everything for you. You're talking about would talk to the owner and everything. In your day, agent didn't do that. They didn't know as much. They weren't up on that type of thing.
They did have agents, but the agents had no leverage. You had no leverage, the agents had no leverage. If Cleveland drafted me first and the owner wanted to offer me $20,000, there is absolutely nothing I could do. The only thing I could do is commit professional suicide and say, okay, I'm not going to play. I'll withhold my services. Well, then you might be affecting them because your services might be worth $1 million to them. But if you've poisoned yourself by saying, I'm retiring at 24 years old, then it makes it harder for them to go in a back room and trade your rights to somebody else for $1 million. So the only leverage you have was the threat of retiring and not playing, because to play standard player's contract and play out your option is just ridiculous. I'll give you an example. The Giants were interested in me one year. They needed a tight end and they liked me, and I was in the process of trying to get a contract from Cleveland. I went through all the training camp, not under contract. If I get hurt, I lose out. I'm not under contract, so I'm taking all the risks. So they approached me and said, we'd be interested in getting you. Well, they got back to me about 3 weeks later and said, well, look, I want to tell you that we wanted you, but Cleveland wanted 2 first-round draft choices and a starting player before we paid you a dime. So what person in their right mind is going to give up twice what I'm worth before they pay me a penny? So play out your option was just like, professional suicide. They held all the cards, and you had a choice: either play under their terms totally or don't play. But I think what bothers me the most is they advertised the best players in the world, and unfortunately they got the best players in the world, but they didn't pay them anywhere near a fair salary. And I'm not the Lone Ranger on this. There's a lot of people that work for businesses and then kind of get shafted at the end, lost out on their pensions. Look at the fighters that literally gave their blood to fight and ended up with everybody getting their hand down on it, and they're walking away with not a lot to show for themselves. So I'm not the Lone Ranger on basically getting shafted, but somebody you think of a guy, 10-year career in the NFL, this guy must have 2 Mercedes in his garage. Well, that wasn't going to happen, at least pre-1975 in the NFL. Cleveland actually, I remember, lost a first-round draft choice to Canada, whose budget was probably 1/50th of what the NFL was, but they had a first-round draft choice tackle that Art Modell lost to Canada because his offer to the guy was so low that it was better to go play in Canada than play for Cleveland. And it sounds like I'm giving Cleveland a bad rap, but if I'd have gone to San Diego or any NFL team, they all had that unfair advantage through the draft system. So even if the guy was considered, Mr. Nice Guy, they still were holding all the cards, and it was just a question: did you get hammered very bad or just pretty bad? So it was if I had to do it again, aside from just the love of playing, economically it probably wasn't worth me to play in the NFL, because I could have worked towards a master's degree in education. Maybe I could have ended up as an administrator in a high school somewhere, and overall I would have had a better financial career than I had in the NFL, and I was the top tight end in the country pick. So here I am, a first-round pick. Can you imagine what a guy who's picked 15th is going to go through? You know, it's a joke. But,
so, all in all, with the good and the bad, how would you describe your experience with the NFL? I mean, your camaraderie with players and different things, and do you think it was a good experience overall?
That's a good question, Dave, because the fact of the matter is, my best memories are other players and guys that I shared a lot. I suppose it would be like people that were in the service and met other guys from all over the country that they had to count on to survive and get along with. Well, during the heat of play, you have to count on certain guys, and you have friends during the course of the year. And I would say, of what I took away from the game that I remember the most, the games themselves were fun. The 75 hours of practice and films and everything was boring. But the games themselves, those 3 hours, was really interesting, a lot of fun, and you really could get into it. And then certain individuals that I really liked. There were some I didn't like, but most of them and a few of them I really liked a lot. So coming out of it, that's what I came out of the whole thing with. And I would say another thing that was helpful to me, that I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't say, even though we weren't compensated for it, but the confidence and ego gains from competing at that level was good for your ego. It made you a more confident person. It did a lot for you. And although that isn't tangible, it was valuable. And it helped me as an individual. Plus, you haven't met my wife Ellen, Dave, but we were married. We've been married 38 years, and she went through this whole thing with me, right back from we were married my senior year at University of Mass. And she helped me get through it because there are some stressful times. It's just you're under constant pressure. You can have the greatest game in the world, and they want to know, what did you do this week? I remember Erich Barnes playing defensive back and making an incredible play on knocking down a sure touchdown pass at a night game in Cleveland. There were like 90,000 people there. He made this diving, stretching knockdown of a sure touchdown pass, got a standing ovation from 90,000 people coming off the field. The next series of plays, he gets beat for a touchdown and get a standing boo coming off the field. We're talking 5 plays back to back. He went from, he's our hero to who's this bum in 5 plays back to back. So you're only, and the players know this, you're only as good as your most recent performance. But the thing is, the players accept that, and they know that. I know you've been through this, Dave, in your athletic career. When I was, you're a little older than me, not a lot, but you're a little older than me, and I remember yourself and some of your friends and all the expectations people had on your performances. And what happens is you take on a certain responsibility, like you're a key running back. If I don't make so many yards or a touchdown here and there, and if I don't make some big plays, we don't beat this team. And I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about of responsibility and what people expect of you. You've been through it, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I think everybody's been through it on some level, you know, and in any kind of event, and not just sports and something else. So people's expectations, and you're allowing them to have those expectations, and you're going to fulfill them somehow. I think expectations is a very, very strong word in sports. There's the expectations that you allow people to have on your performance. If you're going to make 3 or 4 big plays a game, you're going to have to pay a heck of a price as far as effort and concentration goes. You're going to have to go all 70 plays, all out, because you don't know when the big play is coming. But they expect it of you, and now you expect it of yourself. And that's something I think all great performers have in common. They expect a lot of themselves just as much as the public expects them to perform.
It's like a show business thing, right?
Oh, really?
You got to perform at the peak of your game all the time.
Yeah, it is. It's not hindsight. There's no hindsight in sports. It's helpful for the next game to correct your mistakes. But when it's happening, this is it. It's the truth.
Yeah, it's not like a practice where you run a play and it doesn't materialize, you run it over again.
Exactly.
You don't run it over again in the pro.
It's not, you know, you make a down block on Deacon Jones. It isn't who you know, where your degree is from, how much you get paid, nothing to do with it. It's all, do you make the play? And to me, just like when I used to go upfield to catch passes, it wasn't 13-yard out, make an inside move, come back, snap your head around. Those were all like a shortstop fielding a ball, turning, pivoting, and throwing. Those are all like the physical, natural things that you do. What made the difference, whether you made that catch or not, the most important thing was you coming to the line and saying, I'm going to make this catch. I don't care what happens, I'm going to make this catch. And if you have that attitude, and your body will do what's necessary to make you make the play. And if you don't make the play, maybe you shouldn't be there. But if you make the play, you should have been there, but you got everything that you needed to get to make it work because you said, I'm going to make this work. And if you've got that attitude, I don't care if you're lacking a lot of other skills, you have that makes up for a lot of them.
One thing now, when you were playing, did they have the dog pound then?
The dog pound was after me.
Was afterward.
When I played, there were a lot of those cliche purple people eaters, the Iron Curtain, the Doomsday Defense, the Fearsome Foursome. I played against all of those, probably helped make them famous. But they had, I played against Bob Lilly, Ted Hendricks, Lambert Ham, Larry Wilson. It's amazing how many Hall of Famers that I had, Dick Butkus, that I had a chance to play against. And you'd always rise a little bit higher against the marquee players because you felt if they were the best that there is out there and you did well against them, that you belonged there and you did well. The first game I can recall playing was against the Redskins, a night game. And Vince Lombardi went to coach for the Redskins in his last year or so. And I think they had the linebacker for the Giants, Sam Huff.
Oh, yeah.
And
he was.
The game went on. I ran across Patton. I didn't make the catch. It's one of the very few that I ever dropped. And it was rookie jitters. And I came back to the sideline after a series of plays, and I said to myself, I got to stop looking at numbers. I can't look at that number and say, that's Sam Huff. How am I going to perform against him? From now on, he's just number 30 or whatever he is. I don't care what his name is. He's another guy on the field, and that's my attitude from now on. And boy, did that help me. I ended up making a few catches and some big plays. But I stopped, you know, you don't know whether to get dressed or get autographs. And I got to a point where I said, hey, I wouldn't be here if I didn't have something to contribute, and I'm going to find out what it is, but I'm not going to get stage struck by marquee players that scare me to death because they're supposedly you can't beat them.
Yeah.
And throughout my career, I think if I had any high regard by other players, I think it was because I made big plays on great players. I can remember blocking Dave Wilcox, pushing him 10 yards upfield and off the field, and he's a Hall of Famer. So you know that the next 5 teams we played, looking at those films, saying, "Well, gee, this guy has some potential." Actually, one of the best plays I ever had was on a fluke. It was against Carl Ellett, who was put into the Hall of Fame this year. And what happened is, I come off the ball, and he's defensive end, and I'm attacking him, and we're trying to run a sweep or something, and he gets his forearm caught in my helmet in the face mask. I don't think it was this face mask right here. I think I had an open bar then.
Yeah.
And his wrist got caught in my helmet. Well, I realized if I put my head down, he had to go down, and if I put it up, he had to go up. So he was worried about breaking his hand. And I realized I had control of him, so I got him kind of tap dancing backwards and ran him 10 yards upfield. But the film didn't show that his hand was caught in my helmet. The film only showed me pushing him upfield 10 yards. So I know that got me a lot of respect, but it was totally unfounded.
That's great.
Yeah, so my career was built on a lie.
No, it wasn't. You had an excellent career. I enjoyed watching you. The people in Leominster enjoyed you. And just to touch, basically, you went to St. Bernard's. I remember you playing 4 sports, baseball, basketball, football, and track. I remember you growing in leaps and bounds. We used to call you Little Milty, Little Milty. But when you got into high school and you get through high school, you were just Milty. I don't know if they still call you, Leominster people still call you Milty. And I remember you had a great career in all sports. You enjoyed growing up in Leominster, playing sports, and I know you always mentioned Leominster and the Little League and the different teams.
Babe Ruth League.
Babe Ruth leagues and all that stuff.
CYO basketball leagues. I have a lot of friends and a lot of memories from Leominster growing up here. It was a sports town, and for a family of 8, where sports is the only thing you can afford sometimes, bats and balls, you could afford those, and going down to the Doyle Field and playing like Little League baseball. I don't think I had a better athletic experience in my life than Little League baseball in Leominster. It was just great. I mean, I just loved it, and I got so much out of it. And that's all Leominster. And so I have a lot of fond memories about Leominster.
Glad you never forgot where you came from. And just sort of mention, to get away from sports, I mean, you have 2 children. And one of them, Monty, recently got an award. You want to mention Monty?
My wife and I are really proud. My son Monty, who's 37, he's a staff reporter for the LA Times. He doesn't do sports, he does news, hard news. He won a Pulitzer Prize in reporting this year. When they had the LA fires last year. His job is that several reporters would call in facts and figures and information and names and different things that happen, and he would write. He's got a real gift for writing. He would write all the articles. So he won a Pulitzer Prize for that. He's just spent 2 months over in Iraq as a war correspondent. He's back now, thank God. My wife and I are just scared to death when he's over there. So he's really made his mark in journalism, and he has great talent. A lot of that's from my wife's side, probably all of it. And then my daughter Ellen, who's 30, she's in the restaurant business, and she lives on the Cape. So I have 2 children. They're wonderful kids.
That's great.
Yeah, but we're kind of like empty nesters now. So it's a different lifestyle. My wife, we both just retired. Now we always thought it would be kind of easy going, put it in neutral and just roll downhill. But it seems like there's not enough hours in the day to do the things we want to do. So we're kind of surprised. But I think in my family, the Morins, one thing I'll say for everybody in my family, there were 8 kids, and everybody's, except for my parents, all my brothers and sisters are all around. But my family, as a trait, have a very youthful outlook on things. They could be 75 and have a 20-year-old outlook on things. They're very youthful thinking. And my father had that trait, my mother had that trait, and everybody in my family has inherited that. So I'm 61. When I'm 71 or 81, if I make it that far, I can guarantee you that I'm going to think like a teenager, and I'm going to have that youthful, and that's a gift that was from my parents. And I'll tell you what, all the stuff I said today, you can almost erase it all and chalk it up to biology. For my mother and father, if I had any skills, it was all from them.
I remember them well.
I'm sure that strength and things, I got that from my mother and the certain attributes my father had, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that I inherited a lot of natural ability from my parents, and I just fell into the right slots to show it and had opportunities to show it, but without that I have nothing.
Okay.
So,
in closing, a youth coming up wanting to reach their goal, some of the things you might say is probably stay away from drugs, obey. What did you have to say for the youth watching this program?
Well, first of all, I've never done any kind of a drug of any type. I'm not a good liar. I didn't want to be speaking up to a high school speaking engagement, and some kid asked me if I've ever done grass, and have me try to gracefully lie about it, because I can't do that. So what have I done? I've never done anything with any drugs anyhow. just the competitiveness has been a natural high for me. I don't feel I ever needed any drug or anything. It's just, you know, competitiveness is what carried me. But advice to young people, if you like doing something and you want to be great at it, you can increase the chances of you becoming exceptional at it through effort, which you can control. You can control your effort. And concentration. You can control your concentration. You can't control the size you're going to be too much. You can't control how good the opponent is. You can't control the weather. There's a lot of things that you have no say in. You just work around them. But a couple of things you can control is your effort. If you have 65 plays in a football game and you decide that you're going to give a great effort on 65 plays, something good's going to happen on some of those. That you can control. And concentration is you focus on what you're doing, and if you have some bad habits or bad things, you want to eliminate those. You want to upgrade those so that you no longer have weak spots. And then if you have good abilities, you want to take advantage of them, add to them. There's things that you can get the best out of your abilities if you can evaluate what you do well and upgrade it, and eliminate the things you don't do well, and you can control everything by your effort and concentration. So that's my, you know, I don't care what the sport is, whether it's soccer, whether it's non-sports, whether it's anything else you do. Your effort and your concentration will determine eventually how well you'll do. So that's an opinion.
Very well spoken. And I thank you for your time, and it was an enjoyment for me to have you here.
Dave, it's great seeing you again.
Great seeing you.
By the way, Dave's kind of been filling me in on all my friends over the years, because he's like a fixture in town here. He's been here forever. And he's been filling me in on all the different guys that I knew, and over the years have thought about, you know, whatever happened to so-and-so, or how did he do, or what happened to him. And Dave's been really giving me some great information on guys that I've always wondered about, and that's been a real treat for me, Dave, coming back. And to be even presented here the way you're doing it is really an honor.
Well,
thank you.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.